All right, buddy, how you
But
doing? It's Mark
good.
Ross. How's it going? We got Ann Carpenter here today. One of my favorites. Athlete, adventurer, advocate, entrepreneur, geologist, mining professional. Ann, thanks for joining us. What's happening?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. It's so good to see you. It's been a while since we've been able to have some fun together. So I'm happy to be here.
I know. I would much rather prefer we were on a ski lift somewhere talking.
Me
That would be a
too.
much more proficient conversation. But here we are on this bloody device, video, telephone, whatever situation. So here we
That's
go.
right. Virtual. Our new
Um,
virtual reality.
Yeah, the true new virtual reality. Well, listen, I love talking with you for a number of reasons. Like, first off, the ability for you to like go into the desert and find interesting stuff, I find endlessly fascinating and interesting. That you actually understand what's happening on the Earth, but also, just your ability to develop minds. I mean, we're in a very interesting, situation. People love energy. We love these modern devices, and they're frankly everything's powered by mining, and there's not enough credit given to that amazing industry. But as the world really wants to go, cleaner, modern technology, etc., it's really going to require more minerals, and you're the person to talk about it. Can we make this happen? Is everything all right?
We can make it happen if we have the political and the will of the country. You see countries like China, they're just bulldozing ahead on so many fronts. We're stuck in a morass of political agendas as opposed to looking at the long term. It seems to me this country just plans for a 2-year cycle tied to elections, right? So we really don't have leadership that says 10 years down the road, we have to be here. Let's do this on permitting to ensure environmental protections, but that we can actually get the mines and other infrastructure built. And right now we're just at a stalemate because the regulators don't know how to regulate, and they don't know how to regulate timely. We have
Right.
the regulations that give us the most respected environmental and social protections the world over. In fact, they're copied around the world, but we can't seem to get them to work here in a sane timeline.
I think, you're multiple generation Nevadan, right? Your family's been there.
No, I'm a multiple generation Westerner.
Westerner.
I
Okay.
was Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
I was born in Montana, but we moved to Reno when I was just a kid.
Oh,
And
perfect.
then I've been a desert rat ever since. My husband's a multi-generational Nevadan.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up, I mean, for me, I grew up in the industrial Great Lakes, and I have a lot of
Mm.
friends on the East Coast that have never even been to, Chicago, or they've never seen Lake Michigan, they've never seen Lake Superior. They have no idea like what's happening in a major part for me,
Yeah.
like of the country. And then I think vis-a-vis the West, like there's so little understanding of the scale and just the bountifulness of the West. And for me, it's always been seems to been very controlled by the East and all the history and all that interesting stuff. I mean, is that just part of the problem? We've just this massive country that we just don't fully appreciate how bountiful it is.
I think the public is disconnected from where they get their stuff. Like
Right.
you get your phone from either Walmart or the iPhone store. You get milk from a grocery store. You get your car from a dealership. People don't really think of the components that go into all of that to help it to make milk happen, for instance. So I think that disconnect, it's very basic to me that people don't really understand where their stuff comes from, but they want it. And that
For sure.
and yeah, like unimpeded. And it's difficult to do that when you cannot get, say, a mine built or your bridges built or a new battery plant, a battery production plant, Tesla or otherwise, right? It there's a regulatory process that's very interruptive as opposed to supportive. And we don't embrace in this country seriously how respected our regulations are. The protections that we have, we're respected the world over for these environmental and social and safety protections. And yet it takes us, say, 10, 20 years to build a mine. That's just
Yeah.
crazy. Canada, you can do it in 2 years. Australia, you can do it in 2 years. Those are two equals to us and friendlies, right? And they do it to the same standards as us. China just builds them and there's no standards,
Right.
there's little safety, health, and environmental protections that are in place. So I think it's really quite funny because in the stalemate that we have, or the stalling pattern that we have to get this infrastructure built to support, say, the electrification to get us closer to carbon zero, we can't get stuff built here, so we push it off onto countries that really don't care that much about everything else we care about. So we're pushing off the global or the planetary impacts to somebody else that just doesn't care. That to
Yeah,
me
that
is
is.
irresponsible.
No, I was gonna say that is a. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work I've done in the U.S.-China space, and just thinking, and I've even heard from Chinese diplomats that they've said, listen, you guys have switched your pollution to us. There's other things going on, but the Chinese are also very sensitive to that idea as well. That, oh, you want us to build and manufacture all this stuff, but we're dealing with the runoff. That's a whole separate conversation. Anyways, talk about Canada and Australia. Like, why do you think why do they have a different appreciation, if that's the right word, for natural resources, or why have they embraced a quicker on-ramp to developing mines?
Well, it's interesting because I've been a part of working groups that have collaborated across boundaries, but especially with Canada, not so much with Australia, but distantly with Australia too, with regard to sort of synchronizing our regulations, because we share a border, but our minerals kind of cross the border. So we
Right.
want to make sure that we're protecting these to the same efforts. I just think they have a much more willing regulatory process that doesn't want to interrupt the flow, and they know they have the protections because they're adopted, if you will, and evolved from the U.S. Regulations, and they just have a much more willing process. There is much a mine. Say if we're just thinking about mining, there is much a mining state as this country is, or mining country as this country is, and yet they get it done, and we don't. I think a key interrupter for us are NGOs in this country, non-governmental organizations, the environmental lobby that really just wants to be interruptive. They're not interested in finding a solution forward, except somebody like Trout Unlimited. Trout
Right.
Unlimited likes to come, sit at the table, tell us what they think is right or wrong, find a partnership to go forward, stitch it together, and then go work together and get it done. You don't see that in the other NGO communities. They raise money by conflict. I've created conflict. I'm going to stop this. That way, my bank account goes up, and then we're stuck. So I think don't get me wrong. Canada has their own NGOs, but they want to find a solution. So we've got to switch it up in this country and stop being so interruptive, and stop letting special interest groups, the environmental lobby, sort of stall things,
Yeah.
because they can't be proud of this in my mind, because all they're doing is pushing this off onto China. China will
Right.
deliver the goods back to us, but they're going to have the environmental impact. So on a planetary basis, that just doesn't balance out.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about NGOs and environmental groups forever, and just lobbying in general. I think there's such a move in the States that there's like a zero tolerance, whatever the industry
Yeah.
is or the special cause, and any movement on the spectrum, like the group feels like they're not doing their job. So it's all about, sometimes, unfortunately, about stopping, whether it's aviation, mining, and
Yeah.
it's like everybody, I don't know anybody that wants to pollute, right? Like, even if you're
Yeah.
in a dirty industry, and even if you're starting a new company, I mean, I've been working with young entrepreneurs, and nobody I know is like, yeah, I want to dump, raw sewage into Lake Erie, right? Like, that is like, nobody thinks like that, and they want to like be efficient and energy sensitive and environmentally sound. So I feel like that debate's been settled. Now it's a matter of like, how can we best use these resources in a way
Yeah.
that benefits everybody, that doesn't leave a horrible footprint. And maybe that's just going to require more conversations and more communications.
Yeah, well, and the realization, the acceptance that the regulations that we have are incredibly protective protective of both all three, social, safety, and environment. So let them work. Find a way through permitting reform. Doesn't mean you rewrite it. You just get in there, create the schedule, put the schedule in place. The regulators have to operate to it. That's all, right? That permitting, a lot of like the environmental movement likes to say, oh, they want to rewrite everything. No, NEPA is a very strong document.
Right.
Flip mount all the regs and statutes. We just need to implement them. And we need to implement them in a timely fashion and stop the delay factor, right? Because when you read the regs, they have a particular schedule that's written into them. So just follow the schedule. We could be done in less than 5 years instead of 10 years of monkey wrenching.
Yeah, and then anyways,
or 20 years. Yeah,
it's absolutely crazy. I mean, net zero and we want to be 2050, and that's already around the corner. But if it's going to take 20 years to open a mine, like I don't know how we hit these crazy targets. Anyways,
yeah.
Let's talk about. I mean, there's such buzz, no pun intended, around electrification and whatnot. And you work with a lot of junior miners. You're an entrepreneur yourself. You're literally on the front lines of what's happening. I mean, it's also a very boom and bust industry from my perspective. It requires a lot of capital to kind of go in there. And it does take, like, you're looking at investment over 20, 30 years. I mean, is there hesitancy from the mining community? Like, oh, we've heard this before. Like you're saying one thing, but you're not doing the other. Or do miners just say, listen, it doesn't really matter what the buzz is. Like, we know what we need to do. What's the mindset in the mining community?
I think you remember Ruth Carraher. She said, like years ago when people started talking about electrification, goes, great, let's do it. That just means more minerals we've got to go find. Think about it, like she and I and others were talking about it. You need at least 5, if not 10, depending on what statistic you're reading, 10 times more copper. We need to bring back control of lithium and rare earths into this country. And there's very much a move afoot, and Nevada seems to be ground central for that. There's at least 3 mines that I know of that are getting federal funding as well as automaker funding to help make that happen, so that we not only mine the product, the materials there, but we turn them into batteries.
Right.
But every mineral, there are, go look at the periodic table. You pretty much need the whole periodic table to get to electrification. So there's an increase to the gold you need because of circuitry. Silver, same thing, because of circuitry. But also, I'm just giving generalizations, but to the solar panels. You need rare earths for renewables, especially wind engines and such. But you also need it for our defense. Rare earths are found throughout our defense and even in our products, our everyday products. Copper. That's a whole nother one. It's at least 5 times. We need 5 times the volume because not only the electrification of a car takes, I think, 3 to 5 times the amount of copper wire that a regular car takes. And I don't think people really understand that. And these are not bad things, because if we mine them here, we do them responsibly.
Right.
But people don't, people have got to understand that there's not a net balance on that side. There's going to be an increase in minerals. You don't do it by just picking up a battery off the shelf of Walmart. This stuff has to come from the earth somehow, right? So
yeah, no, getting back to like cars, like I think the average automobile is like 20,000 different parts, and a team of engineers had to figure out what parts are needed, and then somebody had to go out and build all these parts. And then I think about the battery situation. No, you're spot on. Like, it's not just going to your local store and buying the end product. There are like thousands of decisions, many suppliers, logistics, engineering. It's a tall order.
Well, here's something that kind of cracks me up, but not in a ha-ha sort of way. We have 2 lithium mines in the country. One of them is outside of Tonopah, and it's an evaporation pond system. So the other one is hard rock mining out of Vegas, down right inside the boundary into California. We fought hard to try to build a plant there, like 10, 20 years ago, to try to build a plant there. and California shut that down. The great state of no. We'll say no to everything, right? So that material then got shipped off to China. So it went across this great big pond, this great big ocean, on a barge, burning fuel, goes to China. They've built these processing facilities and the manufacturing to go with it, and then we get batteries sent back to us. Again, it's got to
Yeah.
come back across this great big ocean, burning fuel. That's crazy. That carbon footprint alone, everybody should be embarrassed about, because we as a nation, but California as a state, said, no, we're not going to build a processing facility. Nevada is now taking that on. Yay, Nevada. Like we have 3 lithium projects moving forward. One that's received permits, the other one that's receiving permits, and the other one that's in the development stage. 2 of them are in the region of Tonopah, central Nevada, and the other one's up in the northern reaches of Nevada. These guys are going to do their own processing. They're not shipping everything off. They're homebounding it. And we need to homebound more of this material. First, if you want to focus on carbon, it's going to have a smaller footprint, right? And second, there's nowhere else on the planet that we can do it with better protections. So we're seeing that coming to roost in Nevada, which you got DOE providing funding. I'm not sure if DOD has with some of these folks, because there's a defense component to this.
For sure.
There's a national security component to it, but DOE has with some of these groups, maybe not all, manufacturing, the car manufacturing, car company battery ties to car manufacturing, they're coming in, they're investing in this because they want to homebound it. They want to bring that manufacturing back home.
I like that term. I haven't heard that homebound term. I'm going to use that. That's really cool. And we're going to see more kind of end to end, I guess, mineral extraction and then processing on site. I mean, do you think that's the future? A mine's going to become a much more complex, almost end to end factory. Is that
like an industrial complex? Yeah, I think we need to move in that direction. You've got your infrastructure in place. You probably have a large footprint, land footprint, so that you can utilize it. You got a workforce you can diversify. You've got electricity coming in, whether you're generating your own with solar, wind, or nuclear power, because a lot of mines are looking into that. And then, you've got this complex. I got my minerals here. I have my processing facility here. What would it take to make to flip that around and build something here? That's
pretty cool. Let's talk about the geopolitics of mining. It's very complex. Some of our friends in the South America favor national. What am I trying to say here? They favor nationalization. Yeah, they favor this mineral can't be taken over by private companies. It must be run by us, the country. Listen, economically, you can understand that. Politically, but what's the good and bad of that? I mean, is that just the state of play, or do we got to respect that? Or, I mean, what's the challenge there going forward? I think there's a partnership opportunity, but I can't respect it because, I'm an exploration geologist. I'm also a mineral developer. I'm okay at working on the discovery end, but where I really excel is on the development end. Take something that somebody else has found. These discoveries take real creativity. I'm more of an engineer in my head, where I want to put all the moving parts together to get to a construction decision. So that's permitting, community engagement, environmental, and engineering, and then this complex moving parts to get it to constructed, right? So that's expensive. The exploration end is expensive, super risky. So you start de-risking it on the exploration side, and then you've got to de-risk it on the engineering and environmental side, right? Right. So when you get these things built, these are international companies that come around and build all over the globe these mining industrial complexes. So you get them built, and then to have them nationalized and pulled out from underneath you is not a good path, right?
that doesn't respect all the risk that was taken to get it to the construction phase, and then just to have Bolivia take back a lithium complex, to have other South American countries take back a copper complex. That
Right.
creates unrest and uncertainty in the investment community. So I've seen it throughout my career, 40 years of doing this, and that it's not a good thing when that happens. But there is an opportunity to form a better partnership so that when you bring your expertise in from around the globe, that nation respects it, and in partnership you develop the minerals together.
Do you stepping back versus China? We're in a very interesting time in China geopolitics. Obviously, I've been joking. It's us, U.S. versus them. Like what team are you on? You see different countries saying they're not going to import certain products, and there's been this talk of like an economic NATO. This idea of friend shoring, ally shoring. I mean, are we at a point where we need to have more, for lack of a better word, like super international organizations? I mean, would it be beneficial if there was like a mining NATO where like 7 countries are kind of all on the same page and collaborating on this, or
That's
is that
interesting.
still a
That's
bridge too
interesting.
far? I mean, mining to me also seems very personal, right? Like, especially in this country, you go out, you prospect, you find something, you stake a claim. Is mining
That's
set up
the,
for kind of more international collaboration?
well, I think we may be moving in that. I think we're already there because I've done mineral development overseas for a good 30 of my 40 years. I worked in Africa in the mid 90s, in Tanzania, but traveled a bit around the East Africa area and noted that China was in deep there. So were the Netherlands. But they would come in, Chinese, Netherlands, they'd come in and build infrastructure for, pick the country in East Africa. And they were doing it all over the continent there. But they weren't building, especially the Chinese were not building it in a way that gave ownership back to and capabilities back to the country that they were building in. Like in
Right.
Tanzania, they built railroads and roads, but they didn't really teach everyone how to maintain those railroads and roads. So all of a sudden they would just degrade, disintegrate, and they'd have to go do it again. And pretty much that's a debt building process, right? So that then makes the country beholden to the nation
Correct.
loaning the money, the Chinese in this case. So listen, I was watching it 30 years ago and just going, these guys are being brilliant. Like they were doing it all over the world, really. And they were securing pathways to mineral resources that way that they didn't have in country, or that they wanted to control elsewhere. So well done on them. We all got outplayed by it, but whether it was being nefarious, like I'm going to take over the world, or I'm just making sure that I got, stuff coming back to my people.
Right.
Either way, they were way more strategic than anyone else around the world. And I think that now that recognition is now coming home to roost in every country, amplified by the Ukraine war, the Russians' war on Ukraine, where we're now seeing food and
Yeah.
fertilizer pinch points, and it all just comes home to roost. I think in the 90s, we started offshoring all of our needs, initiated by the Clinton administration and then amplified over the years to, oh, we'll be part of this globalization. We don't have to produce anything anymore. And look where we are. And, the first time I met you, I was, and still am, I'm affiliated with the Women's Mining Coalition, and we were coming back to speak to members of Congress about potential actions, either over the world or locally, that were impacting our ability to have a strong domestic mining industry. And we were utilizing some of USGS's data, the foreign reliance data, and it has gone nothing but up. It was like 8 minerals we were 100% dependent on back in the 90s when we first started coming back, and now we're at 22 or 25, 100% that we're relying on nations like, and China's really at the top of the list, China and
Right.
Russia, unfriendly countries. and then more like 42 or 45 that greater than 50% reliant on foreign countries. So it's, yeah, I mean, we've just gone in the opposite direction. And I think a lot of countries now with the amplified by, spotlighted by the war on Ukraine have come, kind of looked around and went, where do we get our stuff? My, these pinch points are going to happen more often. And so I think on the nationalization, to bring it back to your question, the nationalization front, I think countries are now becoming protective to make sure that their minerals are at their control, and they can then form the partnerships they need that are going to, shore up their own needs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's us versus them. That is like my new buzzword. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, America's an amazing place, but sometimes like we wait for a crisis to do something. So
To do something.
I want to
And then we'll talk about it for a long, long time before we do something.
As we wrap up here, I want to talk to you about two things. I'm really fascinated by nuclear and hydrogen, and I wonder if the battery stuff has been settled. If China's so far ahead in the battery space, I mean, should we be, as a country, or as this like economic NATO kind of Western democracies, I mean, should we be jumping to the next energy? I mean, should we go all in on hydrogen? Should we go all in on nuclear, or is that just not feasible?
Oh, it's feasible. And I think we need to do it. We need, I believe every energy source, every energy type should be a part of the equation. And that as we keep migrating to a lower carbon future, because we're never going to get to zero, it's a little impossible. And I think
we should have a whole pod on just the wordsmithing around net zero. I mean, it's like,
it
sure,
irritates me.
It's more mathematics than it is reality. I mean, depends how you measure
exactly.
stuff, right? Anyways,
but let's start, heading towards higher density fuels that have a lower carbon footprint. So,
right.
Hydrogen can be that, especially if it's tied to, say, nuclear. Nuclear being a very low cost, very low carbon fuel source of energy can then help hydrogen. It can also help LNG plants have a much lower carbon footprint. So I think I just spent 4 days in a really great nuclear conference here in DC, and it was put on by NEI, so that's Nuclear Energy Institute, and they did a brilliant job. There was just a lot of talk around this topic too, Mark, where they said, can we really get there? And we're at a tip over point, the globe over. Everywhere else around the globe, they're building them. They're building SMRs. They're building full-on plants. What's the stat coming out of China? They're building like 1,500 megawatt nuclear complex, either a week or a month. Either one of those numbers is crazy.
Right.
It's staggering. And here we are, we're talking about it. We got the capability. We have a whole bunch of tech that's being developed in this country. And other people are going, bring it on, bring it over here. We're going to build it. Especially Europe. Europe is incredibly motivated, again, by the war on Ukraine. They felt the pinch points this year.
Yeah.
And so the technology is amazing. And you can build these smaller. You don't have to build the great big complexes. You don't have to use up all those resources to build a huge complex. Those complexes have a position in the nuclear food chain. But these SMRs now, small nuclear reactors, these advanced reactors, they now can sit inside of an industrial complex and service either one industry or service a full community, where you can get to maybe more focused energy delivery without interruption, and with a low cost and a low carbon footprint. I do believe that nuclear has an incredible place in this front.
Yeah, I hope
in this need.
I'm super optimistic about nuclear. I mean, I even think about, the U.S. Navy. He's got a whole fleet of nuclear subs being trusted by very smart, 20-year-old kids. Somehow, they managed to, and they're underwater. They're living next to a reactor.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's interesting. I listened to this French diplomat and just thinking about AI and the impact of Hollywood has on our understanding of science fiction and culture. And, like sometimes the future is portrayed by Hollywood as, negative, dark, ugly. And, sometimes that
Yeah.
your perspective of it, and there's always two sides of the
Yeah,
story.
so I keep seeing this film flashed up. Is it The Day After or something like
Yeah,
that?
of
And
course.
it's
Yeah, that's
it's
classic.
global warming with the sea levels rising at a catastrophic rate, like a tsunami, but at epic
Yeah.
proportions. And it's like, as a geologist, it's like that's not going to happen. It's going to slowly happen over hundreds of millions of years, right? We don't do it Hollywood style. It won't just take out Manhattan, right? So it kind of cracks me up.
Don't bring your science knowledge into this, Ann. That's no good for Hollywood. Hey,
It's
as we
taking
wrap
all the
up,
fun out.
I just want to ask you, this is what, wrap up question. Anything you're reading or watching that it could be fun or frivolous or fun or insightful, or you're just like, this is a book everybody should be reading. You've been telling anybody or watch any kind of documentary?
Yeah, so I haven't watched Nuclear Now, which is an Oliver Stone
Oh
movie,
yeah,
but
I'm
I've
keen to
heard
see. Is it out
tremendous.
yet? Yeah, no, is it out yet?
I think it's now being pushed, but of course Hollywood's getting in the way because this is science, this is knowledge, this is a documentary, and it doesn't have all the whiz bangs and the car chases, right? So, as I understand it, there's a bit of a. So I would recommend folks to kind of put pressure and try to watch that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the snippets I've seen. Really, this is a guy, Oliver, who hated nuclear and then decided I better look into this. Like,
Yeah.
it's low carbon, high energy density. It operates 24/7. Like, maybe I should do some research. And he pivoted. And then the book that I read recently was Peter Zahan's The End of the World as We Know It Is Just the Beginning. It's a fascinating book. And this guy, I listened to it on Audible, and he reads it. So he inflects it with his humor as he wrote the book. But my gosh, that guy has a lot of knowledge. And this book came out in 2022. It's incredibly timely. So all the statistics and the metrics and the trajectories that he talks about are very timely.
It's interesting you
I
mentioned,
think those
yes.
two things.
Yeah, no, it's interesting those two you cite. I mean, I think both those gentlemen do a really good job of telling stories, making the world accessible, going
Mhm.
in with almost a journalistic kind of perspective. And yeah, you may not agree with everything either one of them come up with, but I think having a deeper appreciation or not being intimidated by the world is kind of really necessary for our fellow
That's a great
citizens.
way of putting it, right? Because all this stuff doesn't have to be scary. Like, fill your head
Yeah,
with like knowledge and then make your own mind up.
yeah, the
Stop
the
having
world is cool.
newspapers tell you.
Yeah, fight the algorithm. Hey, Ann,
That's
thank you
right.
so much for making the time. This was great. You're an absolute champ. Hopefully I'll see you in the mountains somewhere soon.
Let's make it happen.
I
We'll be
love it.
skiing right into the summer,
I
like
know.
possibly
This
to
morning when
August.
you
So
said that Mammoth is going to go year round, I was like, I got to ski in Mammoth in August. I mean, just to be like,
you have to, yeah. Keep looking on if they don't get a super hot melt. I was just down there, and there's a crazy amount of snow. Like, it would have been crazy the dead of winter, like
yeah,
middle of January, middle of February. But here it was middle of May, and I'm like, really? This is how much snow you guys have? Let's keep going. So they said they were going to attempt to have their first all year, year round year, but really there's too many things, too many variables that would that are driving that decision. But for sure, I mean, as a kid, I used to ski there all the time in July, so I know they're going to July. Yeah, let's look
people,
at. In fact,
yeah,
let's try to meet there in July.
I love it. Let's do it. People talk about endless summer. I talk about endless winter. That's what's the
Me
best.
too. Me too.
All right, Ann, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
All right, talk soon.